Podcasts can be so boring. No, I'm sorry. Please don't go anywhere. Please stick with me. Let me qualify that particular statement. Before coming to do this show with my good friend Kevin and Angela, where we started a little bit over a year ago, I'd actually not listened to a lot of podcasts outside the two that I enjoyed. And the two that I enjoyed and still enjoy to this day is Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR and The Rachel Maddow Show, which I don't ever get to watch. So, and of course, the podcast for that is really just the audio ripped from the TV show. So, there's Wait, which has about a dozen people producing it. I listen to the credits at the end every time, and then Rachel Maddow's show, which has at least a dozen people working on it too. So those shows sound absolutely fantastic. Bells and whistles and noises and all the rest. But there's a lot of people behind them. And so just recently, I decided, well, some of our local talk shows they're just not so fun to listen to. So I said, well, let's see what's on the podcast front. I started flipping through my phone, listen to these podcasts, and so many of you podcasters are so boring. You really need to step it up a notch. So anyway, I just started checking out those other shows, and I've decided I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because this is the kind of show that I want to hear. These are the stories that I want to hear, and I certainly hope that you want to hear them too. So with that incredibly weird way to start, I want to welcome you to The Fire You Can't Put Out. My name is Melvin. As always, your host. Today we are doing episode 54, and we are taping on my eldest daughter's birthday, which is February 1st. So this is February 1st, 2014. My eldest daughter turns 11 today, so happy birthday, sweetheart. So I want to get started with this, the State of the Union. I didn't pull too many stories for this, but I did watch the State of the Union. The speech, in my opinion, was largely milquetoast. There were a few good points that I liked. I thought the Madman reference was funny. You know, we need to start having policies that don't look like they're out of a Madman episode, talking about women's pay equality. I like the fact that he said global warming is a fact, an absolute undeniable fact. The debate is over. I liked that. I also liked the minimum wage statement. You need to get with the rest of the country and raise the minimum wage. Nobody who works full time should be living in poverty. It's really not that mind-blowing of a statement, and it's really unfortunate that we're in that spot right now. With respect to the minimum wage, all the OECD nations that we are essentially competing against in the world, we are near the bottom when it comes to that. I think we're second or third from the bottom with what we pay our people for minimum wage. It was unfortunate hearing the president, my president, getting up in front of the nation during this great speech and begging the private sector to start paying people what they're worth. So much money has started, is at the top and is not trickling down despite what we're being told. Here is the fantastic thing about the minimum wage, if there is any light. This issue, much like the TPP, the left and the right have a pretty large agreement on. There's not a lot of space between us. Because Democrats and Republicans alike are both getting screwed over by the minimum wage. Your boss doesn't ask you what party you belong to and pay you accordingly. So there's not a lot of debate on this. Well, there's a little debate. There's a few people out there, if I could paraphrase, I believe it was Eisenhower, when talking about the people who wanted to take away Social Security and equal pay, he said their numbers are negligible. You know, they're a small and insignificant group, and they're stupid. And this is the same way. Most of the country is on board with this because so many people from all walks of life are hurt by the minimum wage. So the very, very few people that are fighting the minimum wage, Koch brothers, Heritage Foundation, of course, Fox News and all the right-wing hosts. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of them because they've got a huge platform. They got microphones and all the rest. But essentially, the people who don't want this done, their numbers are very, very small. And so that's good news. I'm glad that the president mentioned it. It's unfortunate that it seems like we have to beg. But see, this is the part where we are the government. We go to our legislators. We say that this is what the people's will is, and this is what we want. And they're going to fight us on it because right now, too much of Congress, obviously 100% of the Republicans, and in my estimation, about 60% of the Democratic Party are almost absolutely outright owned by the billionaires. So they're taking all of their marching orders right now from that very small and insignificant group. But there are more of us. And so when they start hearing from us, eventually they're going to have to do it. Now, I'm broadcasting out of the Portland, Oregon area. I believe in Oregon, they have indexed their minimum wage to inflation, so it goes up every year. Washington does too. They've indexed theirs to inflation, and so it automatically goes up every year, which is good news because you don't have to ask every 10, 15, 20 years for a minimum wage increase. It just automatically happens. It grows with inflation. It'd be nice if they indexed it to gas or food, because those are the things that seem to go up the fastest, but at least it's indexed. They say, well, if the minimum wage goes up, it's going to raise prices. People are going to go out of business and all the rest. And that's great. That's great that those talking points are out there and that they're resonating with people. But obviously they're not true. What's really happening is the opulent are afraid of becoming less opulent, and that's the real problem. Their opulence, by its very nature, makes them insecure. There was a report by Oxfam, and as reported by McClatchy, that came out recently that said the world's richest 85 people control the same amount of wealth as half the world's population. Now think about that, okay? That means the world's poorest 3.55 billion people live on what the richest 85 possess. Okay? Another way to look at it. Each of the wealthiest 85 has access to the same resources as do about 42 million of the world's poor, a number equal to the populations of Canada, Kentucky, Kansas, and all that taken together. Okay? This comes to us from BuzzFlash. Oxfam echoes what many have warned. The mega concentration of the world's financial assets in the hands of so few undermines the very viability of democracy. The Oxfam study emphasized the point, the tale of two economies, the rich are getting enormously more wealthy. And as the rest of the world's inhabitants become poorer due to the wealth redistribution to the top 1%. Now, so often we hear, you just want to redistribute the wealth. Here's the thing. I want people to be paid for what they're worth. And if you're arguing that those people at the top who have everything just don't have enough yet, and the people at the bottom have too much, there's something wrong with that. And it's unsustainable. See, those people at the top are eventually going to lose their customers too. Because if you got all the money at the top and there's absolutely nothing at the bottom, then who's going to buy your stuff? Who's going to rent your apartments? Nobody. Because nobody's going to have any money. You'll have it all. So perhaps I am for redistribution in arguing that we should pay people what they're worth. You at the top got wealthy not alone. You hired people, yes, and you paid them, yes, but you paid them 10 and you took 90, which actually if it was that, I wouldn't even mind if it was that. But what it's more like is 1/100th of 1 cent and then you took everything else. And that's, you didn't get rich alone. Sorry. You hired laborers and they worked for you and all the rest and, and your taxes. you should pay your taxes too, because chances are you drive on public roads, your business drives on public roads, your people they got a public education more than likely. You depend on the court system to enforce your contracts. You police and fire and all the rest. You get all these benefits. So you say, nope, we don't want to pay our taxes and we're not going to pay our people a living wage. Just the kind of thinking that goes into that blows my mind. All right, so the report said that the trend is more pronounced in the United States than other nations. Not a surprise. I mentioned that here just a little bit ago. American exceptionalism, right? That's the conservative talking point. American exceptionalism is now pretty much limited to it being a great engine to pump more money into the hands of a small subsection of the 1% at the expense of the rest of the world and the population. The GOP and their constituency are the main ones who are pushing this. Now remember, they have no need for democracy. In fact, they have contempt for it, unless they're using it as a jingoistic phrase to advance strategies that increase their incomprehensible fortunes. They're so rich, they don't need us. So, if we raise the wages, oh, come on now, please. All right, so a recent story in Reuters by James McGeever, a chief market economist for Reuters, quotes Chief Goldman Sachs U.S. economist Janet Hatzius as saying, quote, "The strength in profits is directly related to the weakness in hourly wages, which are still growing at just a 2% nominal pace. The weakness of wages and the resulting strength of profits are telling signs that the U.S. labor market is still far from full employment. The bottom line is that the favorable environment for corporate profits should persist for some time yet. In that case, for an acceleration in the near term is strong. Hourly labor costs would need to grow at more than 4% in order to eat into margins at a systematic basis. How about we raise them to at least that 4%? I'm going to say it. I say it just about every show. And I picked it up from somewhere. You have to forgive me, I don't remember where. But I say it because it makes the most amount of sense. Not paying a living wage has absolutely nothing to do with eating into their profits, or they're going to have to raise prices. They don't care about their customers any more than they care about their workers. They need to keep you impoverished. They need to keep the working class impoverished so that the working class will remain politically impotent. Okay? They need you working. They need you broke. They need you sick. They need you uneducated. And they need you to celebrate that ineducation that you have. The information comes at the same time that the U.S. Secretary of Labor, Thomas E. Perez, released the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2013 Union Membership Report. The report unequivocally shows that among full-time wage and salary workers, union members have higher median weekly earnings than non-union workers. The median weekly earnings of union members were $950 compared to $750 for non-union workers. All right, so here in America, our middle class was by and large built during what I call it Reconstruction. It's the period after World War II when FDR was in charge, and we had high union membership, and government being employer of last resort to pump money into the market. This was FDR getting us out of the Great Depression that we were in at that from the decade of the 30s, the 30s, I believe. Okay. And the period from I'd say the mid to late 40s up until the early 80s, which you'll remember that is when St. Reagan became president, the middle class grew at a wonderfully, incredibly fast rate. It was just beautiful. But if you remember, what else came out of that period? People were active in government. They were out protesting. They were carrying signs. They were knocking on congressmen's doors. They were fighting for social change, right? They had good economic change, but so they were working for social change. Some economics, because obviously we were still fighting for equal pay for women back then too, as we are now, as ridiculous as it is. So, and I remember Ronald Reagan was quoted as saying, because the network of colleges, the UC colleges in California, used to be free. And then Ronnie was governor of California, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the quote in front of me, but I remember he said, why do I want to pay for their college when they're protesting my policies? And obviously that kind of a thing was paid for by taxes, because we are investing in our intellectual infrastructure. And Ronald Reagan said, why do I want to pay for their schooling when they're just protesting my policies? And there it is. He shows the heart of the Republican Party right there. I don't want people paying attention. I don't want people marching in the streets. I don't want people looking behind the door and seeing what we're doing. So, let's keep them working 3 jobs at a time. Okay? Let's make sure that they don't have health care. Let's make sure that access to education is incredibly costly. And then, once they get out of college, let's make sure there's no jobs there by shipping them overseas. And it's worked out beautifully. And now, we are fighting back in the other direction. It might come to a collapse, another economic collapse before that happens. But it's happening. Good days are on the horizon. They're coming. One of my favorite congressmen, and I've given him money before, so I'm on his email list. It is Alan Grayson from Florida. Wonderful, wonderful Florida. It's crazy because so many not good things tend to come out of Florida. Anyway, we're not going to go into that. Go into all that, but I got an email from Alan Grayson recently, Congressman Alan Grayson, congressmanwithguts.com, and he said it was titled "Catching Up to 1968." And I'm quoting from the email: "Every person who works full-time should make enough money to survive." Yes, absolutely. $7.25 an hour if you work full-time. That's only $1,257 a month. If you only make the minimum wage, then that's all you have available to pay for food, rent, transportation, utilities, clothing, healthcare, and taxes for yourself and your children. What about paying for education or vacations or saving for a rainy day? Forget about it. $7.25 an hour doesn't seem like much unless you're a waiter or a waitress, because they are only paid a base wage of $2.13 an hour because they make most of their money through tips. Okay, $2.13 an hour, that's less than the minimum wage in Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. So he says it's time to raise the minimum wage, and I'm trying to do that, introducing a bill called the Catching Up to 1968 Act of 2013. I love the names of his bills, which is H.R. 1346. He says, my bill increases the federal minimum wage to $10.50 per hour and applies that figures to waiters, waitresses, and all other tipped employees. Sign our petition at raise the minimum wage at nowageslavery.com. Now, catching up with 1968, that comes from the federal minimum wage was $1.60 an hour in 1968. If we had increased that with the cost of living, just as we do for Social Security benefits and military pensions, today's minimum wage would be $10.50 an hour in terms of purchasing power. I make more than that, so when I make an argument for raising the minimum wage, I'm making it for my countrymen. I already make more than the minimum wage, luckily for me. I have the kind of job that can't be outsourced. I drive for a living, okay? But trust me, if they could outsource it, they would. If there was some way they could hire somebody, that didn't have my qualifications, they would definitely do it. I'm a professional driver. I've got a CDL, and they can't just go take some guy for $5 an hour and put him out there, because the first time he gets pulled over without a CDL, you're not going to get a CDL if you can't get a license in this country and all the rest. So right now, it's hard to outsource the kind of job that I do, but I'm fairly certain there is a Republican congressman somewhere who is trying to turn that over too. So the Farm Bill finally passed through the House, and it surprised everybody. The full details are out there and available now. What is so surprising, obviously, is they've been fighting about this bill for years now. The Republicans wanted these draconian cuts to the food stamp program. I don't know if a lot of you know that, but the food stamp program is inside the Farm Bill. It's a part of the Farm Bill. So the Republicans wanted to cut something in the neighborhood of $40-some billion out of the Farm Bill, out of food stamps, out of the food stamp portion of the Farm Bill. They didn't get 40-something billion, but they did get something. They were able to strip $9 billion in SNAP benefit reduction. So what that does, obviously, is that's going to create more food inequality. There's going to be more people starving, going hungry, and all the rest. And I can almost hear the screams out there in the distance of the conservatives going, well, dang gummit, they should just get a job. Well, we should just bring those jobs back, too, so that they can have a job. Or we should raise the minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage would make people less dependent on these kind of benefits. But you know what? They're there. So, after food stamps were reduced at the beginning of November, they were just reduced at that time. They've been actually cut now with the Farm Bill. New York City food pantries and soup kitchens ran out of food and turned people away. This comes to us from Think Progress, Bryce Gov't writing over there. I'm quoting from the article here. And reduced the meals that they handled after experiencing a surge in demand, according to a new report from Food Bank for New York City. The organization surveyed 522 food pantries and 138 soup kitchens and found that in November 2013, nearly half had either run out of food altogether or the particular kinds of food that they need to make adequate meals. About a quarter had to turn people away since they didn't have enough food, and about another quarter had to reduce the number of meals that they provided. The survey asked them to compare conditions in November of last year to September and October, as well as November 2012. 3/4 saw a surge in visitors in November as compared to the months before, when 16% saying demand increased by more than 50%. Okay. In November, an increase in benefits from the SNAP program that was included in the stimulus bill to respond to increased need during the recession was allowed to lapse, and that reduced benefits by about $9 per person per month, bringing the value down to of less than $1.40 per person for each meal. I'm talking about New York City, but obviously this has played out over the entire country. Okay? Even before the cut took place, private charities had warned that they wouldn't be able to pick up the slack, especially with the charitable giving being down after the recession. If Congress is worried about reducing spending on the program, all it has to do is wait, because as the economy gets better, the demand for this will increase. But here's the other thing. Every $5 that's spent on benefits generates about $9 in economic activity. Well, dang gummit, they should just go get a job. They should just go. I understand it's very cold on the right side of the aisle. And I'm being very partisan here. Nakedly partisan. And I don't care. Because those kind of values, especially for a supposedly espoused Christian group, and you find most of the people on the right side of the aisle fancy themselves as Christians, and that's fine. I like Christ, whatever the story is. I like how he lived, born poor, died poor, worked to help people. So I imagine when they say Christian, they mean Christ, Christian, as in Jesus Christ. But obviously they don't. They slash and burn these benefits because they say that we need to reduce the size of government without a second thought. And then the pantries in New York City run out of food. And then that plays out across the whole country. New York becomes a microcosm for what's happening everywhere. But it's also winter. And with climate change, essentially in full effect right now. We are seeing really, really hot summers. The 9 hottest years on record are in the last 10. But we're also seeing the what do you call them? The weather systems, the jet streams, changing around the nation. Okay, some places have way too much moisture. Some places have too little. In Oregon, they're already expecting a drought. And in California, they're already in a drought. And they're expecting that to get worse. And then in other places, they got too much moisture. They also got that polar vortex bend, which did what? It froze a lot of places over. And we reported a couple shows ago about people that were freezing to death due to exposure. There's not a lot of money for the shelters. And so there's a lot of people being forced to sleep outside. This comes to us from Scott Keys over at Think Progress. Quoting from the article, Willie Mae White loved to dance. She told stories about her boyfriend. She treated everyone with kindness, and she was homeless. On Tuesday, she froze to death at the Joliet, Illinois bus stop where she called home. She was 55 years old. In the past week, as a cold front swept through the Midwest and Northeast, at least 5 homeless people have died from the cold. Temperatures fell to single digits. Obviously, most of those places way below freezing. So, in addition to Willie Mae White, Glenn Donovan, 53 of Highland Falls, New York, was found in the woods near the Hudson on Friday night. Obviously, also expired. A Philadelphia man. See, the rest of these don't even get names now, because they're still determining who they are. His body was found in the freezing cold Thursday morning. Officials have not determined his name yet. Jersey man in his 40s. Even the people who saw him on a daily basis said they did not know his name, wrote the Jersey Journal. He slept in abandoned cars. His body was found Wednesday morning as the temperature hit 5 degrees. A Chicago man who remains unidentified after dying from hypothermia on Tuesday. Why don't they just get a dang gum? Why do they have to depend on the government? Here's the thing about government. I said it before, and it begs being said again, because there's obviously a fake debate going on out there. And when I say fake, I mean there's nothing genuine to it. It's not the government. It's that we depend on each other, and the way we collectively solve problems is the government. That's what we do. We get together and we govern. And these are issues that are facing our people. And for the people who say that this is a Christian nation, my, I should say, if Christ were to take a look at it, he could say, I am Christ. And there's no way this respects, or there's no way this reflects my values. Fighting for the wealthy and letting people starve and freeze to death and then arguing that they should go without health care is not the Christian thing to do. What say you? You can probably hear the sounds of joy in the background. My daughter, obviously, all her friends are girls, and so they're doing lots and lots of girly things. The voices in my house are at a very, very high pitch, so if you can hear it in the back, come on, it's just joy, okay? All right, so there was an interesting story this week about the head of Bayer Pharmaceutical, and I wanted to talk about this. This is one of those not reported things. So the next couple of stories I'm going to get into, obviously more of the class warfare stuff, but also the upper 1/10% that the conservatives in America are fighting for. This is definitely one of them. So in an interview with Bloomberg Businessweek, Bayer CEO Martin Deckers said that his company's new cancer drug, Nexivar, isn't for Indians. That's a quote. Okay? The drug, which is particularly effective on late-stage kidney and liver cancer, costs approximately $69,000 per year in India. So, March 2012, an Indian court granted a license to an Indian company to produce the drug at a 97% discount. Right? If we're in the business of helping people, as the pharmaceutical companies say that they are, well, here's a great way to help people. Okay. Bayer sued Natco Pharma Limited. In March of last year, the High Court in Mumbai denied its appeal. Bayer CEO called the compulsory license issued by the Indian court essentially theft. He said, quote, we did not develop this medicine for Indians. We developed it for Western patients who can afford it. That's a direct quote, okay? I know I'm laying it on thick here. Nexavar costs approximately $96,000 per year in the United States, but Bayer assures Western patients that they can have access to the drug for a $100 copay. Here in America, there is, speaking of theft, Bayer says if you can produce this at a wildly cheaper cost, and you hear that number, you say, it reduces the cost by 97%. There's no way that there's that kind of a markup on drugs. Well, you would be surprised. This comes to us from Mike Papantonio over at ringoffireradio.com. Okay? He has been reporting on this pretty wildly lately, and a big kudos to him and his team. So, how much are drugs marked up in America? Let me start with this. The Medicare Modernization Act, also known as Medicare Part D, okay, which was the bill passed by a Republican Congress in the early 2000s and signed into law by George W. Bush. This was something that he really, really pushed for. They talked about this is freedom this and freedom and all the rest. Okay, fine, whatever. All right, but that law prohibits the federal government from negotiating with drug companies. Okay, he signed the bill on December 8th, 2003. So Medicare and Medicaid cannot negotiate drug prices. Well, the markup can't be that bad, can it? Let's take, for example, Celebrex. Okay. 100 tablets cost you go to buy it, $130, okay? Their cost to manufacture that drug, are you sitting down? 60 cents. You heard that correct, not $60, 60 cents. 100 tabs are $130, but it costs them 60 cents to make it. That is a 21,000% markup. Are you still with me? Lipitor, 100 tablets, $272 to you, the Western consumer who, as the Bayer CEO says, can afford it. $272 your cost, their cost to produce it, $5. That's a 4,696% markup. Let's just keep going. Paxil, 100 tablets, $220 for you, the Westerner who can afford it, but they make it at a bargain basement price of $7. Total. 2,000% markup. Prozac, 100 tablets, $247. Okay? It costs them, the hits just keep on coming, it costs you, okay, $247. It costs them 11 cents. That's roughly a 40,000% markup. I'm going to blow your mind one more time. Take, for example, Xanax. 100 tablets. $136 for you, the Westerner who can afford it. Their cost, 0.024 cents. Just a hair over 2 cents. For a markup of 570,000%. This is who they're fighting for. So, how do the wealthy feel now that we are speaking out against them, that we are threatening to take away the economic royalist power? How do they feel about it? Well, they think that they're being persecuted like the Jews were. What? Yeah, no, you heard that right. They think that they're the richest 1%. They're being persecuted just like the Jews are. Well, at least according to one nutbag. Ladies and gentlemen, meet venture capitalist Thomas Perkins, who wrote a letter to the editors at the Wall Street Journal comparing the plight of the rich to the Holocaust, called Progressive Kristallnacht Coming. And the Wall Street Journal published it. The Wall Street Journal is obviously another one of Rupert Murdoch's rags now. Rupert Murdoch's rags. Wow, I called him Murdog. It's a slip. Quote, I would call to attention the parallels of fascist Nazi Germany to its war on its 1%, namely, its Jews. To the progressive war on the American 1%, namely, the rich, Perkins writes. Thomas Perkins, one of the founders of venture capital firm Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers, was comparing taxes on the super rich to the slaughter of millions in the Holocaust. This is true. They're so persecuted. Okay. Quote, from the Occupy movement to the demonization of the rich embedded in virtually every word of our local newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, I perceive the rising tide of hatred to the successful 1%, Perkins continues. Perkins ends his rant with, this is a very dangerous drift in our American thinking. Kristallnacht was unthinkable in 1930. In its descendant progressive radicalism, unthinkable now. They hate us because we're so successful. And I love it when conservatives, obviously wildly rich conservatives, compare Nazis to progressives because, as everybody knows, the Nazis were more or less a cult, a religious cult. Hitler practiced a form of Christianity I don't think has too many members anymore. It was, if you can believe it, it was called positive Christianity. And of course, this is what they adhered to when they carried out the slaughter of an entire group of people. But aside, it's not good to make that kind of a comparison, because obviously it diminishes the actual horrors that were the Holocaust. Okay, George Bush isn't Hitler. Obama isn't Hitler. I understand Bush is responsible for a lot of deaths, but it's not in the millions yet. But even still, not Hitler. The richest 1%, you are not being persecuted for being successful, and you are not being thrown into ghettos and gassed in the showers, and shut up. I say, Melvin, it's so mean, why do you hate his success? I don't hate his success. Melvin, that's God, you're so partisan. Why must you be so partisan? Maybe the Republicans, maybe they're not bad guys, right? Maybe, they've got a, heart somewhere. Maybe they do care about people, right? When they say that everyone should stop depending on government, they really actually just care about us a great deal, and they just want to see us do well. Well, okay, well, maybe. Well, no, maybe not. Further proof. The Republican National Committee, okay, there was a law signed back in 2010 called FATCA. And the Republican Party is calling for the repeal of this law. Okay, FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act of 2010, is a law requiring foreign financial institutions to supply the IRS with information on U.S. account holders for tax purposes or face stiff penalties. The law's requirement takes effect July 1st, 2014. Since its passage, FATCA emerged as a global standard as countries seek information on their own citizens' offshore money. In its resolution, this comes to us from the Wall Street Journal. In its resolution, the RNC slammed FATCA as overzealous, saying the law forces Americans living abroad to make a horribly unfair choice between renouncing their citizenship and abandoning overseas business. Okay, let's take this step by step. So the wealthy, the job creators, the people that we argue should have all the money, they've taken their money and they've put it into offshore accounts. They've put it into the Caymans and all these other countries, where they generally have to pay to have that money there. These bank accounts aren't free, but they'll pay that. They just don't want to pay the taxes here in America, which the country that helped them build all of their wealth. Okay? So this law says, no, you want to put your money outside the country, well, we want to know what's there. Because you're going to pay your fair share. You don't get to benefit from America without paying for the benefit of living in America, okay? You don't get to walk into a restaurant and eat and then walk out without paying. And we're not making you make a horribly unfair choice between eating and not eating. It's an imperfect analogy at best, okay? But they're saying, we want to know about the money. Here's the other thing about this law. We also want to know about illegal money, terrorist money, and drug money. And the RNC, the official right-wing party in the United States, this is the official party. This isn't an offshoot. This isn't the teabaggers. The RNC is saying no, absolutely not. The foreign transactions that happen between drug cartels, and kingpins and terrorist groups and the money that's put outside the country, you shouldn't know anything about that. You shouldn't get to know anything about that. We should continue to benefit from America. So now wait a minute. What about all of that, the job creators, right? We gave them all that money. The average CEO makes 10,000 times what his lowest paid worker makes, which should mean that CEO is going to take that money and reinvest it in America, and he's not. And he's not creating jobs. So the RNC is suing to have this, they want to sue to have this overturned. Okay? It's not likely that it's going to happen. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to fight for it anyway. It's a grown-up world. Pay your taxes. If you like America, you like the benefits you get from being in America, and America does make it possible for you to get rich, you should be willing to pay for that privilege. It's not free, because you don't get to look at people who collect welfare and food stamps and call them bums, and then you get all kinds of government benefits as well, and then you don't pay for it, and then you label yourself a job creator. But Melvin, you're being too hard on them. They're just as legitimate as anybody else. It's not like they're going to court to fight for the right to lie to people too. Actually, they are. Case in point. This is an old story, but I just want to, and I've covered it here before, but I want to make mention of it again. In December of 1996, in Tampa, Florida, at a television station, a Fox affiliate called WTVT, there were two people named Steve Wilson and Jane Aker. They're a married couple. They wanted to do a story about BGH, the bovine growth hormone, the stuff that's given to cows. And when they went to their bosses with the story, their bosses, who, by the way, are corporatists. I mean, you say in America there's Democrats and there are Republicans. No, there's corporatists and there's not corporatists, okay? And obviously, here, Fox, they're corporatists. And they said, well, the dairy industry got wind that Steve and Jane were going to do this story, and so by the time they, Steve and Jane went to their boss and said, we want to do this story, they said, no, you need to take this, and this out of the story. They said, well, no, we want to run it as it is. This is the straight up story. We want to run it just like this. And they said, no, you need to take out this, and this. Okay, well, fine. They took those things out, and then, they said, but we want to leave these other things in. And Fox says, no, you got to take out this, and this as well. And they said, well, if we take all that stuff out, there's going to be no story there. And they said, exactly. And they said, well, we're not taking those things out. We want to report what's actually going on to the American people. And Fox fired them, both. So they went to court, and initially, Jane was awarded $425,000, and it was in the court said she was fired wrongfully. She should not have been fired. Steve didn't get any money though, but Jane did. Okay, so that's fine. But before she could even collect her $425,000, the Florida Second District Court of Appeals unanimously overturned it, saying, quote, truth is a policy decision, and that it was up to the station's discretion what truth is. This case started in 1996, and by 2003, I believe, Fox News Corp had won the right to lie legally. They went to court and they fought for the right to lie. And they have that right now. And they're exercising it. Well, the Republicans have decided that they want to take that even further now. What's the next logical step? They want to be able to lie in political ads. This coming to us from OccupyDemocrats.org. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case of Susan B. Anthony List versus the Ohio Elections Commission. The case stems back to the 2010 election cycle when SBA took out a billboard claiming that then Representative Stephen Dryhouse, a Democrat from Ohio, was a supporter of taxpayer-funded abortions because he supported the Affordable Care Act. Real quick. The Hyde Amendment, which is still in place, makes it illegal for taxpayer dollars to go to abortions, but once again, facts do not bother. They don't get in the way of a good story for these folks. Back to the article. The billboard was false and misleading. In return, Representative Dryhouse threatened to sue the ad agency if it was not taken down. Dryhouse also filed a complaint with the Ohio Elections Commission saying that the ad violated the state law that made a crime out of posting a known lie in a campaign ad. The Ohio Election Commission agreed, and thus the case was born. Now the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the arguments. The Susan B. Anthony List is claiming First Amendment rights. Quote, "We're thrilled at the opportunity to have our arguments heard at the Supreme Court and hope that not only will SBA List's First Amendment rights be reaffirmed, but those of all Americans." They love to make it this big sweeping, this is for all Americans. But it's not. Nobody deserves to be lied to, in my opinion. The Ohio Election Commission statute demonstrates complete disregard for the constitutional right of citizens to criticize their elected officials, said Marjorie Denenfelser, SBA List president. What Citizens United did to campaign finances, SBA List versus OEC will do to the legitimacy of the political debate if the conservative Supreme Court decides to vote in their favor. And there's a pretty good chance that they will. There's a slight chance that they won't, but the Supreme Court is conservative. And in the Florida case, they won the right to lie on TV. Now they're fighting for the right, and I understand that the Susan B. Anthony List is trying to say, it's just America, freedom, they don't want us to tell the truth. Well, it's not illegal to tell the truth. If you were simply telling the truth, there would be no court case. And by the way, the Supreme Court, I've mentioned this before, has the discretion to take cases or not take cases. They decided to take the Citizens United case, and now essentially all of our elections are for sale, and that's about to go on steroids with McCutcheon v. FEC, which is also going to be decided sometime before the court session gets out. And now with this, they're fighting for the right to lie in campaign ads. Melvin, you're just so hard on them. They're fighting to lie. And they're fighting to keep you broke, hungry, and sick. And I don't care if that's partisan. It's actually what's happening. And this isn't in defense of what the Democrats are doing, because there's a lot of blue dogs that are right along with them. The Democrats in America slightly edge out the Republicans on some things, but what we really, really have on our hands here, and I myself am a democratic socialist, and I'm not shy about that at all. So I don't belong to essentially any organized party. I mean, Democratic Socialists in America they're a real party, but their numbers are pretty small. But those are the people that I certainly line up with the best. But there was a poll about what people do think about the two parties in America. And Democrats came out slightly better. Actually, on some of these, they came out way better. But, I take this kind of thing with a grain of salt. But it's interesting nonetheless. So in a recent Pew Research poll, okay, the question was, who is more willing to work with the other party? 52% said Democrat, 27% said Republican, 21% said neither. So the Democrats get that one by 25 points, which is a pretty significant margin. So, okay, I'll agree with that. Is more concerned with the needs of people like me. Okay, Democratic Party, 52. Republican Party, 32. So the Democrats by 20 points. Okay, is more extreme in its positions. This should have been a larger margin, but I'd say it's reflective of truth just the same. Is more extreme in its positions. 35% Democrats, 54% Republicans, with 12% saying neither. So that's the Republicans by 19 points. 19 points higher, saying that they're more extreme in their positions. Is more influenced by lobbyists. This, if one of these was to be dead even, I think this one probably should have been. But as it is, the Democratic Party 30 and Republican Party 47, with 23% saying neither. Okay, governs in a more honest and ethical way. Okay, 41% Democrats, 31% Republicans. Democrats by 10 points. Okay, can better manage the federal government. 41 Democratic Party, 40 Republican Party, 20 saying neither, by 1 point. A 1 point difference. When you consider the platforms of both parties, there is a yawning chasm. There is a wide split between these two parties and what they at least say that they are striving to achieve. But when it comes to action, as demonstrated in this Pew Research poll, too much, they are just too close together. I think the fastest way to solve that would be to overturn Citizens United. I say fast, but overturning Citizens United is it's gonna be moving a mountain. It's not gonna be easy. But definitely campaign finance reform would help. Some legislation to get that started, signing the petition to overturn Citizens United. There's lots. I mean, but there's a lot of ways. But this is the best one. We need to get money out of politics, and then. This is just a prediction, because the Republicans have been castigated for some time for being the party of big business and the top percent and all the rest. Presidents all the way back to the late 1800s have labeled the Republican Party as such. So if we get this campaign finance reform, we overturn Citizens United, I think you will see, and one more thing, part of the problem obviously is most of Congress is millionaires, okay? And so who are they going to work for? Well, duh, okay? But I think what you'll see, if we get that reform, is you'll see the Republican Party remain exactly where they are right now. And you'll see the Democrats, because if you're a corporatist, you're out. That's it. You'll see the Democrats become a more progressive party. The Republicans stay where they are. And then, you'd have your Democratic majority, your populist movement. And I don't think it would change the Republican Party, but it would certainly move them away from how far right that they are. Okay. This is just Dr. Melvin talking. So, with all of the talk about how we have no money, okay, in the government, we can't afford anything. Of course, when there's a Republican president, we can afford everything. But when there's not, we can't afford anything. That's just the way it is. So where is all the money going? Because, the government is taking in a fair amount of money. But why don't they have any money to help us? One of the most disappointing things about the Barack Obama administration is the spying program. And, of course, when it was started, nobody was outraged because that was a Republican that was doing that, and that was post 9/11, and people said, please, oh please, just do whatever it takes to make me safe. And so Bush responded. But this president has kept those policies going. I visited the National Counterterrorism Center website. That's at www.dni.gov. Okay, And this is a recent press release. I'm going to quote from the press release. Dated December 21st, 2013. Yesterday, the Director of National Intelligence announced the declassification of the existence of collection activities authorized by President George W. Bush shortly after the attacks of September 11th, 2001. Starting on October 4th, 2001, President Bush authorized the Secretary of Defense to employ the capabilities of the Department of Defense, including the National Security Agency, to collect foreign intelligence by electronic surveillance in order to detect and prevent acts of terrorism within the United States. President Bush authorized NSA to collect, 1, the contents of certain international communications, a program that was later referred to as the TSP, the Terrorist Surveillance Program, and 2, telephony and internet non-content information referred to as metadata in bulk subject to various conditions, unquote. So that led to this. It's called Liberty Crossing, and it's in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. It's an 850,000 square foot complex that houses the National Counterterrorism Center. Okay, and by the way, 850,000. That's now. It's growing. Okay, agency was created and funded in 2004. Obviously, before that, we were spending about $30 billion on intelligence. Okay. After they started building Liberty Crossing to what we're up to now, their budget was boosted by 250%. Okay, and in that complex, intelligence is being collected by 1,271 governmental agencies and 1,931 private companies under the government. That's over 3,000 companies that work inside Liberty Crossing. And we don't need that. It's not that we don't need intelligence, because we do, but we don't need the kind of intelligence that we do. And you say, well, gosh, Melvin, they're terrorists. They want to kill us all, right? Okay, well, fine. It's true. They do. They want to kill us all. I'm not going to shy away from that. They want us dead. They're, heads on a pike and all the rest. But we need to stop invading other countries. We need to stop the hypermilitarism. We don't. The American Empire Project is a bad idea, and we don't need to be a part of it anymore. There wouldn't be so many people wanting to kill Americans if we weren't bombing the hell out of their countries. If we weren't killing their people. If we weren't trying to take their resources. Oil comes to mind. And then we wouldn't need over 3,000 agencies working in this one area in Virginia, in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. We wouldn't. And what do you think that this kind of a thing costs? And do you feel any safer? This kind of thing didn't exist, say, in the 50s and the 60s, and, well, we weren't being attacked, but our military power has just exploded exponentially over the last, say, 30 years, starting with, obviously, Ronald Reagan, who just blew the government, the military budget to unbelievable amounts because he was so paranoid about the threat coming from Russia, right? Which turned out to be nothing. Russia, the Soviet Union as it was known at that time, was really collapsing under its own weight and was going to come down anyway. But we started just spending just tons and tons of money at that time. And now, and that's just continued to grow. And every time someone speaks out and says, we should reduce that spending, we should reduce what we're doing with respect to military action and all the rest, they're called appeasers, and they're called weak, and they're called wussies, and they're called, pick your, whatever description you want that makes, women the lesser and all the rest. You want America to be attacked. Well, no, we don't want America to be attacked. But we also don't need to spend this kind of money because we're not any safer. Okay, because we're still in these other countries and, going on these missions and all the rest, and we need to not. And if we weren't spending, you want a place where you can reduce spending. You really want the government to be smaller. Telling your people to go pound sand, take a hike, Okay? You commie loser, you're hungry, you're sick, you're, oh my goodness, you want help. Telling your people to take a hike so that you can spend this kind of money on your military and this kind of money on intelligence under the guise of supposedly making us safer doesn't make a lot of sense. Perhaps the size of government can be reduced, but it shouldn't be reduced when it comes to helping our people. That's where when that money is spent, there's a multiplier effect, and we all benefit from it. We don't benefit from this. This is just something that we're doing to keep the threat down because we've done a lot of really bad things around the world. And this is the cost of watching our back now. Perhaps it's time to not invade other countries, to not spend this kind of money on the military, and to not have this kind of... And this is a very, very costly thing. Reduce the size of this. Put money into other places in the government, more money back to the Treasury, and then we'll be able to help our people. All right, I want to mention a couple, some positive news real quick, and then I'm going to get the heck out of here because I've gone on too long today, and if you can hear the paper crumbling, it's because I've got too many stories I didn't get to today, but I try not to suck up any more than an hour of your time. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, the trade bill that is not going to help anybody at all. Well, it's going to help the multinational corporations. The Senate voted this week to not give the president fast-track authority. So that's great news. It doesn't mean it's dead yet, but it's pretty close to dying. And what this means, since they've denied him fast-track ability, if the president wants it passed, he has to send it to Congress. They get to look at it, and they get to amend it as they see. So it doesn't mean death yet, but this is very, very good news. Okay, the State Department came out with their report, or they're about to come out with their report. They've let parts of it leak about the environmental impact of the Keystone XL pipeline. And unfortunately, it looks like the Keystone XL pipeline might get passed because the report says, or is supposed to say, well, we'll give it to you here once the full thing comes out, is that it appears that there's going to be is not as much of an environmental impact as essentially or originally thought. But here's the news. Here's the great news, and we need to get at the president for sure. Whatever the report says, the report is just a report. It's not an authorization. So Obama does have final say. President Obama has final say on this. And when that State Department report comes out and it says, let's gung-ho, let's build this thing, call the president. Call the president that moment. Blow up the White House phone lines. We'll give you the number here. If I had the ability, I'd call him right here on the show just to show you how easy it is to call the White House comment line and tell them what you think. Blow up the phone lines and tell him, don't you dare, President Obama. That thing isn't going to benefit us. TransCanada themselves has said that it's not going to benefit us because our number one export in the United States right now is refined oil. So if we think that it's going to bring down oil prices, you know what might actually bring them down is if we keep the oil that we're drilling for here in America, because we're drilling for more of it now than we ever have. If we keep that here in America, that might bring down prices. This stuff is going to be carried from the north to the south, refined, sent away. TransCanada themselves has said that, and as a matter of fact, TransCanada has actually stated it's going to cause gasoline prices in America to go up. Our number one export is oil. What's happening with Keystone XL? If it gets built, it is not going to create all the jobs that they say it's going to create. That's a total lie. But that's what they say. They want that thing built. And that's fine. It's up to them. But it's also not going to bring down gas prices. That's a lie. We're already exporting millions of gallons already. And that's to keep prices up because as the Bayer CEO says, Westerners can afford it. All right. I'm out of here. I'm sorry. That's all my time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for joining me again on The Fire You Can't Put Out, episode number 54. I want to thank you to KiwiStation.com. That's where you can find all the all the shows now, KiwiStation.com. We have moved over from Open Sky. You can still find some of the old shows on Open Sky Archive, but a lot of them are actually, I think they moved them all over to KiwiStation.com right now. So big thank you to KiwiStation.com, the guys over at Kiwi. You can find the app on Android right now. And soon you'll be able to find the app on iTunes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the fire that you can't put out, and we will prevail. Thank you again for your continued support. My name is Melvin. It's been wild. Good day.